want to welcome you to another session dedicated to Qigong Coaching and exploration of principles of art. And also we'll have a Q&A session that will give us an opportunity to explore any aspects of art that are not as clear as you would like them to be. First of all, let me ask you, how are things going for you guys in terms of health, vitality, peaceful resolution of potential conflicts you may have or you may not have? I don't know.
Well, go ahead, Marsha. Go ahead.
For me, it's getting better and better every day.
Nice. And what do you attribute that to?
Definitely doing more concentration of the strength exercises, and in general trying to get as much exercise as I can during the day, whether that's walking a lot, at least an hour a day, or riding my bike, and really focusing on making a better change in my diet.
A better change in your diet?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Something that works better for my body. Really listening to my body more and eating the foods that really strengthen my body and focusing on eliminating those that don't.
So what would be an example of the foods that don't strengthen your body?
Well, there's quite a few, really. There are quite a few. There's a list. But in general, dairy and heavy foods and sugars and even certain vegetables, like starchy vegetables and sweet potatoes. So I'm eliminating those.
I see. So dairy and sweet potatoes and heavy foods. And by heavy foods, you mean, what is the example of heavy foods?
Well, as I said, even I don't eat anything like pasta or bread. I just don't eat that stuff anyways. But even some of the starchy vegetables, the sweet potato or the corn, it just puts me to sleep, literally. And so.
Well, let me ask you this. What would be the example of foods that give you the nutrition that you're looking for?
I usually don't eat most grains, but I found that barley really works well with me. Barley. Okay. And bananas and a lot of fruits and melons. And I would make a smoothie, and I've also started juicing, doing much more juicing.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, congratulations. So you're discovering that some things resonate with you, and those are the nourishing types of food. And if there are some that don't resonate with you, even though some people may say, sweet potatoes are really great, you need to eat more sweet potatoes. Mm-hmm. If they don't resonate with you, it would be silly to take them in or to ingest them, because their body will revolt or just will not benefit so much.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really crucial piece of the puzzle. The ability to discern what you resonate with and what you don't resonate with, and make decisions based on that discernment, which is the most intelligent way to make decisions in general, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Great. How about you, Marsha?
Well, I have taken on more physical activity. For Myra's sake, let me back up and give a little, background. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and so that's been a primary place I'm giving attention as far as creating well-being in my life. And along with the diabetes, I'm walking around with 80 to 100 pounds extra on my body frame that doesn't need to be there. So that's another goal, whether I had the diabetes or not, that I'm putting attention on bringing well-being to. And I've had, we'll call them issues with my shoulders, that there's pain and weakness, and to put attention to that, I have been through one round of the strength training, the harmonious strength training, and got good results. And I would say kept those actions in my daily Qigong practice, but probably not with as much focus as original, right? So I'm putting that back in, that there is more, I'm doing this specifically for my shoulders and paying very close attention to how they respond.
And it's very important to know that the shoulder issues are rarely just the issues that are related to the shoulders.
Right.
They're often issues related to other parts of the body as well. Just to give you an example, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting your story, but it's an important example to share, and then I will ask you to continue your storyline. But if, for example, I hold out and I have a tendency to carry more weight on my left leg, for instance, for whatever reason, maybe my right ankle was hurt at some time, or maybe my right hip hurts, and so I can't put as much weight on the leg, or it hurts to keep weight on it. Well, then naturally I will tend to rotate the body more to the left, align the center line with the toes of the left foot, and that will raise my left hip, because whichever leg you carry more weight on, the same side hip will hike up. Now, if the left hip is higher than the right, hips are part of the pelvis, but sacrum is also a part of the pelvis. And so if the hips are not in alignment, the sacrum is not going to be upright. It's also going to tilt. And that will create a tilt of the entire lumbar spine. And if the lumbar spine is tilted, you will fall over if you don't compensate for that. So what you're going to do is you're going to tense up the muscles called obliques and also QLs on the left side, which will tilt the thoracic spine, where the rib cage is, in the opposite direction, to the left. Then it will raise the right shoulder higher, and it's likely to create tension and pain in the shoulder and the higher shoulder. It's not because of the shoulder. We can harass the muscles of the shoulder into relaxation all we want. If the shoulder is sticking up because of the tilt of the spine, the issues will persist as long as we keep holding out. That's why I always say that it's really important to address root causes, even though the root causes may not be as obvious as the one example that I just presented. And when we understand the root causes, we may continue digging deeper to see, well, what's causing this? So for example, why is it that we're holding out? Well, maybe it's not just because of the injury in the right leg. Maybe it's also because we have certain psychological tendency to be a bit skeptical, or maybe even cynical, or just want to be cool. You know, like teenagers almost always hold out. They want to be cool, they want to be acceptable, but at the same time express their independence. That's the classic example of how people develop holding out pattern. But if it persists for years and decades, it actually becomes so ingrained that we may even end up with scoliosis. Or if we don't get diagnosed with scoliosis, at least the issues of shoulders may be related to the psychosomatic conditioning that we put ourselves through. Because nobody does this holding out pattern to us, we do it to ourselves. And so we basically need to take responsibility for it and dig deeper. Why is it that I'm doing this? under some circumstances, it worked. It actually served me well and potentially maybe even served as a survival mechanism. So we started to trust this holding pattern and the state of consciousness associated with it. And we developed the habit of holding ourselves this way. In fact, we wrapped our sense of identity around this holding pattern, integrating it so that if we don't hold out, we won't feel like ourselves. But that's exactly the invitation to start exploring. What if you don't feel like yourself? Well, does it mean that you're not authentic? Or maybe you're discovering other aspects of yourself, other facets of yourself that you potentially disregarded or perhaps didn't know that they existed. And as we discover these different aspects and assets and facets, we also discover assets or resources, the energy resources associated with different ways of being. And that is exactly where Qigong coaching leads. But I digress. Please continue your story, Marsha.
Well, I would say you hit it right, the nail right on the head, that if I look back, yes, there's some psychological stuff. Yes, it led to physical mannerisms that have existed for, I'm 64 years old. So let's just say I've been doing it for 60 years. I would say that that's probably a fair measure of how long my body has been aggravated by holding patterns that now are really apparent because I'm paying really close attention to my body and it was making me, it hurt, So the other thing that I was going to share with Myra is that last February, I took on a really intense course about rearranging your relationship to food. And where I had not, I would have always said I eat well because I don't eat a lot of junk food. I wasn't really noticing the impact that the food that I was eating was having, other than to say I'm way overweight and I don't sleep well and I'm sluggish all the time, and things that I just thought were old age related issues. Took out the grains, took out the dairy, did a kind of an intensive with fruit sugars for a short period of time, but then got rid of every sugar from any source whatsoever, which includes things like sweet potatoes. I'm finding that even onions are too sweet for me on a regular basis. They have that kind of
sweet onions.
I love onions. Oh my God, I grew up in a place where the onion fields around us would cook you into salsa every summer. So it's taking onions out is a missing, but the result is my blood sugar numbers have gone from the 300s and 400s down to in the 120 range. So my AC from like in the 11 down to into the range of 6, which they completely got off insulin, not taking any other medication, sleep massively improved, energy more than my body can deal with. I keep running into the physical things that are giving me, a moment of hesitation. I would sum it up to say the best for me is that my mindset has taken on a freedom to be happy and content and glad to be experiencing all of these things, because it means I'm alive and growing and I'm good with all of that. So I'm good over here and learning to heal my body.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can find out any questions or challenges. So in other words, you guys seem to be doing relatively well in terms of food, in terms of lifestyle. How about some Qigong practice questions? I am here to answer any questions related to Qigong or Tai Chi or meditation or any other related disciplines. So please feel free to fire at me any questions, and I will do my best to answer.
A kind of a comparison, you know, when they teach you to go to the gym, they'll say one day you're going to work on the upper body, the next day you're going to work on the lower body. In my studies of Qigong, it doesn't separate the body that way. I'm curious if it would be useful to have days that are just about like upper body use and then days that are about lower muscle use, or is there any kind of segmenting that would, just give a better result?
Great question. I would say that integration is one of the primary principles of our art. So like you said, rather than segmenting or separating different parts of the body into specific areas that we work on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, we work more or less the entire system, but we can focus with a bit more concentrated attention given to a particular part at any point in time. The reason, or one of the reasons why in regular strength training courses, they suggest working on the legs one day, on the arms another day, on the torso the third day, and so on, is because they overwork the muscles. In fact, the following day after you do a lot of leg work, your legs probably feel sore. Yeah. And they probably feel really stiff and not very flexible. That's why you wouldn't be able to train them again the following day or two. Same about the arms. You train the arms, and then the following day they feel like they're ready to fall off. Well, that's exactly what we want to avoid by paying really close attention to the edges of our comfort zone and not pushing ourselves over the edge. Meaning we don't cause ourselves overtraining because we're not going after hypertrophy of the muscles. Hypertrophy is what happens to the muscle tissue when you break it down through overtraining. Basically, you tear some of the muscle fibers, and then the muscle fibers regrow, and often, because there is scarring that happens within the muscle tissue, they actually regrow a bit larger. Now, they also take time to regrow, and after they got injured, like through tearing, they will not be able to perform for a few days or maybe a week. If we don't tear the muscle tissue, how do we get stronger? Well, that's one of the secret sauces of our art. We get stronger not because we harass the muscles, tear the fibers, and then let them grow bigger. Instead, we learn how to connect the central nervous system with more muscle fibers that we already have. We already have enough muscle fibers to perform quite a lot of important functions. But often when we send the signals to contract to the muscles, these signals are not very effectively delivered to the recipient, to the muscle fiber. What happens is that some of these signals go on a loop and take their sweet time to make their way to the muscle. That's one of the reasons why after the workout, you may feel like your muscles are really tense. Why are they tense? Well, because they're actually receiving signals of contraction still. Meaning the central nervous system stops sending the signals, but the signals are trickling down, and that may continue happening for even an hour or two or more. It's because of this inefficient delivery of the signals. Some signals may get rerouted to wrong muscles. That's why, for example, you try to lift something heavy and you may end up tensing up your face, tensing up your neck muscles, tensing up other muscles that have nothing to do with lifting of that weight, is because the signals basically got astray and ended up triggering different muscles to contract instead of the muscles that needed to contract. Sometimes these signals go on a loop and basically, again, create a faulty proprioception and faulty contraction and kinesthesia. There is nothing glorious about that. That's why, for example, people often have tic, like a leg or an arm may be shaking or vibrating. And the tic may happen in any part of the body. That's like the muscle that receives the signals that are going on a loop or in a certain cycle. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but many people experience that. They sit, for example, and then they shake their leg.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that? Not because they're doing it consciously. It's an unconscious action that happens because there is this loop of the nerve signals that are being delivered to the muscles in the cyclical manner, and that's exactly what they end up with. Now, that may even explain some issues of Parkinson's, tremors, and other things like this. So basically what we do is we learn how to really get a handle on things that are happening on the unconscious level in our bodies and make some of those things conscious. So much so that we even realize that only small fraction, maybe 10, 15% of our muscle mass actually contracts when we send conscious signals to contract. Why is that? Because the rest of the signals got lost in translation. And so what we do is we learn how to translate the signals more efficiently so that a higher percentage of the muscle mass actually gets engaged all at once. And that is where we get strength from. We get strength from using our existing resources more efficiently all at the same time. Now, it also means that we need to do two things. We need to slow down our practice so we don't do fast push-ups. If we do push-ups, we do them very slowly. If we do squats, we do really slow squats. If we do any type of activities, we basically learn how to do them slowly enough so that we give the opportunity to those nerve signals that are sent by the central nervous system to make their way to the muscles and act together. And that basically means that we are slowing down on our practice and at the same time also exercising greater percentage of our existing muscle mass, which also leads to another thing. If more than 50% of the existing muscle mass gets recruited all at once, often it may compromise the strength of the tendon connecting the muscle to the bone or the ligaments. Why? Because the tendons have not been trained to deal with this much intensity. What do we need to do? We need to increase the tendon strength. That's one of the ways that the Chinese often refer to this type of training. They say, we're not just training the muscle strength, we train for tendon strength. Well, tendon strength is just kind of a side effect. We really are training for muscle strength. It's just we need to also pay attention to the tendons and also nourish the tendons, because otherwise we may rip them. And so that wouldn't be good. We don't want to tear our tendons. We want to strengthen them. And that's one of the reasons why we also make some changes in our diet so that we reinforce our tendons. One of the ways to, let me ask you, do you know how to reinforce tendons through diet? Maybe you know something about diet that I don't.
I would just be guessing to say that some good source of calcium and iron, magnesium would be items that need to be present for that part of you to be healthy.
That's very
water.
good.
And water.
Water, absolutely, yes. If tendons are dehydrated, they become brittle. You're absolutely right. Any other ideas?
Nutritionally, again, just kind of guessing, and protein's got to be in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yes. So you're probably familiar with such terms as collagen and elastin.
Oh, sure.
Elastin is, as the name implies, is relatively elastic type of fibers that we have in our muscles and mostly connective tissues and skin. that actually allows the joints become more flexible. People who have too much elastin in their system have hyper flexible joints, or the hypermobile. You might have heard of this term, hypermobility. Basically, it's the person is like a Gumby. They're really flexible, and the ligaments around the joints are actually too flexible, so much so that they don't hold the joints together. So, for example, the shoulder joint may fall out or get easily dislocated just by trying to yank on something or lift something heavy. That's one of the reasons why people experience problems with shoulders, because it's one of those few joints where the weight of the arm is pulling the shoulder out of socket. So basically, that's one of the reasons why hypermobility is not particularly great. You may be really flexible, but you may be too flexible, or your ligaments are not holding the joints together properly. As compared to elastin, collagen is doing the opposite thing. It actually is adding stiffness to the tissues. And so these tissues, when they have too much collagen, are actually kind of stiff and not particularly flexible. People who have too much collagen are opposite of hypermobile. They are hypomobile, so they don't really have a lot of mobility. They often have difficulty with flexibility. And by and large, they also have other issues often associated with too much collagen in their skin, for example. Well, actually, the skin may actually benefit more than other parts of the body, because collagen makes skin less wrinkly, because skin doesn't stretch very much when you have too much collagen, as opposed to if you have too much elastin, it's easy to get wrinkly skin. So that's one of the things that we can tell by just looking at the person. You can tell that the person has more collagen or more elastin by the shine of the skin, by how flexible they are, and also, of course, people who complain about inflexibility often are the ones that have more collagen in their joints and the tissues. And we need collagen to strengthen the ligaments and the tendons connecting muscles to the bones. So that's actually an important factor to contribute to diet, adding more collagen. Now, you don't want to add too much, because you don't want to end up being inflexible because you have more collagen than elastin. So basically finding the sweet spot, which may be unique and individual for each person, would be really the way to go. Does it make sense?
Well, yes. What food sources give you elastin?
Well, I'm familiar with such things that seem to be pretty popular in Southwest. For example, oxtail soup.
Okay.
Various types of soups that are made of tissues that have cartilage in them and a lot of sinews. They actually have collagen kind of leached out of those tissues, and then you can get it in broth. And then when you eat either broth directly or make soup on its basis, it actually contributes a significant amount of collagen to your organism. And that basically can be transformed into collagen also in your connective tissues.
What about elastin?
Well, elastin is something that is a bit harder to get by. Most people would be careful to take too much elastin, because they basically will make their tendons too elastic. So the muscle contracts, but the bone is not moving because the tendon stretched. I don't know if any particular food source contributes to elastin. If there is, I would like to find out what it is, because obviously there are some people who suffer from too much collagen, so maybe you know.
So do they impact each other? Like if you have too much collagen, it takes away the power, the effect of the elastin, or vice versa? Or are they kind of independent? But say again?
It's an issue of balance. So you can have this much elastin. If you add more collagen, then you're not getting rid of elastin. You're just simply creating a different ratio of collagen to elastin.
Because I would definitely say I'm on the stiff side of the equation. And, you know, way back years and years, like my knees would crack, snap, and pop when I would squat down. And I've just never had that kind of good mobility of range with my hip joints. So it's not just a recent thing, kind of an always thing. And always have been in the world of meat eaters. So those items that you talked about have probably always been in my diet.
Well, Sean just contributed an idea about adding aloe. Right, Sean?
Yay, Sean.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I was listening into your conversation. Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in, but yeah, I've had success with aloe. I've had a lot of people asking me the same question. So aloe seems to be a really good source of both. It has a good balance. So it's kind of like I'd like to add to that, Lama, and just say there are people that tend to they hear one thing, like a buzzword like collagen, and they go for it. And a lot of people they're supplementing their diets with collagen because they hear great things about it, and then they imbalance their body. So in order to have that harmony, it's good to find resources and I'm specifically me, I go for plant resources. So I've looked at aloe, and it has a really good balance of those two. So you just have to kind of, sometimes with these fads, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, because you don't know the whole story yet. And balance is typically the key, right?
I totally agree with that. And speaking of
Am I
fat,
coming up on audio?
You're there.
Okay.
You
Nuts
got-
and seeds. Quickly, we were asking about sources of elastin, nuts and seeds. I was Googling it after it was asked. Go
Oh,
ahead.
good.
very nice. What kind of nuts and what kind of seeds?
I don't know. I didn't get that far. It's just among the many health benefits of nuts and seeds.
Well, I'll tell
Good
you what.
source of
I have
manganese, and which is
decided
important for collagen and elastin production.
Nice.
I've recently decided that I have an almond butter addiction, and I'm just going to have to go to an almond butter rehab center or something and get over my addiction. But if I'm getting elastin, then maybe I'll just keep eating it.
Yeah, maybe it's not the worst thing. You know,
Yeah.
so addictions are different from preferences. If we have a certain preference, or maybe even proclivity to eat certain food, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are addicted to it. And you can find it out simply by stopping eating that food for a short amount of time. If you have withdrawal symptoms, then yes, you must have been addicted. If you don't have any withdrawal symptoms, or if you stop eating almond butter, well, maybe you're not addicted. Maybe your body actually requested it.
Wants it.
So that's one of the ways to distinguish also between fads and what is most appropriate, kind of authentic approach to eating the right foods.
Yeah. What do you resonate with?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, my body definitely loves the oil that comes with the almond butter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for sure. And there's definitely a good resonance there. And probably don't need all the calories that come with it, but
Well, you just need to do more practice, or just do gardening.
but I do want to make a comment back to what you were talking about of doing real slow motion. Lama knows when I started in the idea of doing a squat, I was lucky if I could get a squat that was more than about a 20-degree. If I had 25 degrees going on, I thought, I was like, woo, it's a good day, right? I mean, seriously, my knees and my hips would not give. It hurt, it was painful. And I took on the idea of doing really, really slow squats.
Right.
And I am not trying to do 10 of them in a rep. If I do 3, I'm happy. And
Yeah.
I have gotten to the point where I have about a 90-degree squat, which to me was like mind-blowing that has come to that level. And what I can feel is between what I would call duration, like the stamina of my muscle, if I keep doing what I'm doing, then pretty soon I'll be doing not just 3, but 4 or 5. And as each round of that improves, I can feel my body wanting to let go and be deeper. It's, it's just more of the stamina that says I can't hold it anymore. It's not that I can't go there. I just can't hold that speed at that level. So
You can play with the speed. You can speed it up or slow down at will. So it's not like you have to go at a certain slow pace all the time.
Well, the sitting really, really, really slow seems to be where I'm getting the most benefit. And then when I feel that level of muscle exhaustion, I will come up faster. Still slow, but faster, just to come to the relief. And then we'll actually do some massage or tapping, that to actually bring some more energy back into that muscle before I do another one. And I'm impressed with myself. I don't know how else to say it, but I have gotten good results. So
yeah, and for the folks who are not familiar with what we're talking about, slow squatting is actually quite slow. So for example,
dramatically slow, if you're a llama.
I jump and land softly, taking natural stance, and then I start squatting. And you can see that I'm bringing myself lower, but I go slowly as molasses. And so this is the pace we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not going all the way down to the floor necessarily, but of course I could. I also want to keep my body, if not perfectly upright, at least more or less upright. So I can also extend my arms a little further forward to counterbalance the weight of my torso. So I can go slower without leaning over forward too much. And so as you can see, I'm squatting, but I'm not torturing myself. I can still talk, I can still sing songs if I want to. And then when I start coming back up, same thing happens. I go slowly. My grandfather jokingly called this exercise the setting and the rising sun. So you literally go at the speed of the sunset or sunrise. And we also use this for warm-ups. Your body will really warm up if you go so slowly. For example, right now, I'm feeling very warm. I wasn't particularly cold when I started, but I'm feeling quite warm just because I did one slow squat. And this kind of squat literally creates this amazing ability of the legs to handle almost anything. Right, Sean? You're just doing this with me?
Yeah, since I've been doing this, it really has strengthened my quads a lot. In fact, any injuries I have in my knees, especially to deal with the quad, it's amazing how it can just bring energy right to it. And with this exercise in particular, I've definitely noticed, when you have that shaky feeling, especially when you're going down is the hard part. It's coming back up.
Right.
and that's when you really feel that shakiness in your knees. And Lama, I remember we talked about this. That's you absorbing ATP. I mean, you're breathing heavier, and your muscles are shaking, and that's eventually you getting more. because you're breathing deeper, you're breathing harder, and your heart's racing. So it's like this a combination of aerobic and anaerobic exercise, because your heart is really pounding, and at the same time you're doing this slow strength training. So yeah, everybody I teach this to, they're like, man, I was feeling that the next day, you know, and days after. I said, well, you know, it's not overdoing it the first day, but it's definitely, you know, if you can't go 20 seconds down, 20 seconds back up, maybe you can do 10 seconds down, you know, like we were talking about with Marsha. We don't want to overdo it, and then you feel like you're actually backpedaling.
Yeah, because for me, it's a combination between the flexibility and the stamina. You know, and I'm seeing much more increase in the flexibility, which literally it was my knees and my hips would just stop me. They would be so stiff that they just wouldn't flex anymore to let me squat. So there's been enough of a shift in that. So now it's more of a, how long can I hold it? Right. Because, and I've encountered some technique for being with that. So I imagine myself, you know, in the squat, when it starts to be okay, this is reaching that level, then what I imagine is that I am pushing into the ground, which engages a whole different set of that muscle fiber, as opposed to just letting myself down. You know, it's like I'm literally with my feet pushing down. So I get a whole different
holding pattern, right?
Yeah. Well, and a different, I can feel the
you
grip is different in my hips and in my knees when I do that. Like they line up when I decide to push down. It lines my knees and my hips up, and then the flexibility is still free. It doesn't tighten up the flexibility when I do that. Actually, kind of creates more space for it to occur in.
It's really interesting that you can also practice the principle of grounding right at the same time.
I was just thinking that as she was explaining it. I said, as her feet are, she's leaning more into her feet pushing down, she's grounding, which is, I think, sending energy up. That it just flashed, just what you're saying as I was listening to her. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Right on. And one of the ways to observe the principle of grounding is noticing where you distribute weight on your feet. Because the very centers of the feet, if you divide the length of the foot in half and the width of the foot in half, the very center of the foot is like this major energy gateway connecting it to the ground, like a center of a suction cup. And so if you distribute pressure on the center of the suction cup, it will stick to the surface you want it to stick to, because it will have the suction in the center. That's what we do with our feet. We distribute weight right on the centers of the feet. Because most people, when they squat, they tend to bring more weight onto the toes. Well, that's one of the reasons why I keep talking about extending arms forward. Is not just to modulate the tilt of the torso, but also distribution of weight on the feet. Yeah, it's kind of fun. And also, you will feel like the more you develop the ability to distribute weight on the very centers of the feet, the more grounded you become. And that sense of groundedness then also provides you that energy that will lift you up. So this is kind of a fascinating paradox. It's almost like you're kicking slowly into the ground and you rebound away from it.
Right.
That's also why when we practice kicks, most of the kicks, and a more advanced level of training, of course, distributed just with the center of the sole of the foot. The soulful kick, if you will.
I wonder, Lama, have you ever experimented with the flexibility of the toes and the feet? Because a lot of people, this fascinates a lot of people when they try to do this. So barefoot runners, now I've exposed my pajama pants. I look professional on top, but I've got my pajama pants down here.
That's why I didn't get up to do exercises, Sean.
So here, if you actually try to bring your
It's a good thing you have them on.
try to bring your big toes down and your little toes up, and then switch so that your big toes are up and your little toes are down, and then you alternate between these two.
And that will also contribute to subtle changes in distribution of weight between the medial versus lateral sides of the feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so having like, you know, this is what barefoot runners do to help kind of like, they can gain a little bit more real estate here, you know, when they're doing any kind of movements, because their feet are able to open up a little bit more. And yeah, you strengthen the different sides of your feet. So I've always really found that helpful for me, especially balancing, being a yoga teacher and coach.
We'll definitely try that practice out. I have been paying more attention to where is that center of balance and playing with it. So rolling onto the ball of my foot, but without picking my heel up. So feeling the weight shift all the way forward and feeling the weight shift all the way to the heel without picking the ball of the foot up. So you can feel the difference. And then shifting so that I rise up on my toe, you know, and hold balance. And then back the other way where I can lift my toes completely off the floor and still have balance. And
which helps your shins and your calves. That's good for
and doing it slowly. And sometimes what I do is when I do the upward motion on the balls of my feet, when I come back down, that's an opportunity to do one of the squats.
And I would add to that I would encourage you to pay attention to the entire body alignment, because the entire body alignment will change depending on where your weight is distributed. So if you distribute more weight towards the balls of the feet or the toes, you will start holding forth.
Right.
Notice how you're going to have more tension in the long muscles of the back, along the spine. You will have more tension in your calves, obviously, because you release the tension in the calves, you will fall over forward.
Right.
You will also pull your shoulders most likely backwards, the shoulder blades closer to each other, so that mid-trapezius and rhomboids get activated, as opposed to when you shift weight onto the heels. Most likely you will have tension in your abs and also the pecs, and you will be holding back. And that's also associated with tension in your shins, the muscles in front of the legs. Because if you release tension in your shins, you'll fall over in your butt. So basically, that's one of the ways that we become familiar with our holding patterns, by experimenting. And this experiments go hand in hand with also exploration of certain states of consciousness associated with these holding patterns, and tapping into the energy centers that are associated with these holding patterns. So by doing that, we actually expand our access to our resources and discover certain potential that perhaps we weren't even aware of, which is most people would love to find, but they don't know where to look.
It's been a worthwhile ongoing experiment.
Fantastic. Great. Any more questions about anything that you would like to explore, discover, or discuss today?
Well, there were a few questions just on our poll, and I thought we might be able to dive into those. I don't know if we have time or we could save them for next time, but this is our poll that we took on the Flow and Thrive website. We just had same questions, I think, but a couple people interested. So it's up to you, Lama, if you want to save those for next time or.
Just a moment. Stefan's going to tell me what time it is. He's firing his phone. Oh, it's taking its sweet time. Is it 11 already?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a few minutes to answer those questions. If that's going to be not enough, we'll just dedicate an extra Q&A session just specifically to those.
Sounds good. So we had about 6 people interested in the first question, which was, what is the relationship between Tai Chi and Qigong?
Was it the most popular question?
That was the most popular question.
All right. So the relationship between Tai Chi and Qigong. Well, Qigong, as name implies, is energy work. Qi is energy in Chinese, and Gong is work or practice or mastery of skill. And basically, it's the energy of art that is dedicated to developing a mastery of your own energy and also developing greater sense of harmony with the flow of the universal Qi. And the flow of universal Qi is basically the flow of things. We also talk about the Tao, the flow of things in the universe. As we recognize that everything in the universe is made of energy, we realize that fighting against the flow of things is futile and only leads to more stress and suffering. But if we develop the ability to find ourselves in the flow, then we can enjoy much greater ease as opposed to dis-ease, much greater sense of harmony within as well as without. And also, we may discover what it's like to live our lives with, in alignment with the flow of things, rather than pushing where we think things should go. That is my definition of Qigong. Of course, there are many teachers and practitioners who would have their own definitions of Qigong. They probably will be based on their specific styles or techniques that they learn. Maybe they've done some forms and they think that that's what Qigong is all about. Or maybe they've done some medical Qigong and they think that Qigong is about healing people. But in general, I would say that Qigong is really about finding the flow of energy, discovering how to be in the flow, and also learning whatever lessons we can learn from those moments in our lives when we're not in the flow. Tai Chi, on the other hand, is an internal martial art. It integrates some of the principles of Qigong into its practice. Or at least those Tai Chi maxims sound really good. Many Tai Chi practitioners understand the idea that, for example, it would be good to use whole body power instead of just an isolated muscular contraction leading to an extension of the limb, for instance. But how many of them actually know how to apply that? That's the question. So the reasons why is because the internal martial arts have really great principles underlying them. But the practice of many of those arts often ended up kind of disintegrating into the practice of either forms or certain drills or push hands, and also working with weapons. That is often why people, when they think of Tai Chi, they often think of doing forms. Well, if we dispense with the whole idea that forms are what Tai Chi is all about, then again, Tai Chi is the art and science of using our bodies in a way that gives us the ability to perform gracefully and precisely using what I call harmonious culture movement. Culture movement that is in harmony with the principles of kinesthetic awareness, the principles of body awareness, the principles of energy awareness that we study. And when we practice Tai Chi, we actually learn how to achieve more by doing less, which is also the definition of peak performance. So the relationship between these two arts, Qigong and Tai Chi, then boils down to what is that we're looking for and how we practice. If we look at the need and aspiration to live in harmony with the world, we focus on Qigong. If we want to develop more harmonious culture movement and the ability to achieve more functionality in our actions as compared to what most people achieve through exercise, then we'll do Tai Chi. If we look at integration of these two arts, then we start discovering how to basically develop such culture and movement that allows us to be in the flow. And that's what Qigong is all about. That's basically what we teach and practice.
I think the Qigong is more all-encompassing. It goes beyond form. It becomes a practice of daily life, whereas Tai Chi is a little more limited to being, like, as you say, the harmonious body movement. But for me, at my level, having been removed from karate and well, not so much yoga, but karate and the understanding of those principles of how I moved, for me to go back into some of this, learning these forms has been phenomenal for me, because at the end of doing a form, I know if I'm doing it correctly, and the breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing and all, and spine aligned, it's almost like reteaching my body in a sense. And but when I finish that form, I can feel the chi. I can just feel the opening of the energy, like the energy channels open. It's like, and I'm like, wow. You know, at the end of it, it's like a wow, a beautiful feeling for me. So I think for me, at the level I'm at, and it will take me then to that next level of the Qigong, where I can then learn to move in that, you know.
Absolutely.
That's just my own feedback from what I'm getting. I mean, Qigong is just a whole new thing for me anyway.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things that I've done with many Tai Chi practitioners, including many people who are very well skilled and well trained in Tai Chi and have been teaching for 10, 12, 20 years, is I help them rework their forms. I said, look, if you want to do forms, I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't do it. Knock yourself out. Do your forms. But can you inform your form with the principles? Because most Tai Chi forms are not following the principles of this whole art. For example, in no form do they have any movement that would allow you to use whole body power. I'm going to actually do a special class invited by Violet Lee to do like a guest teacher kind of class on her podcast. And I said, well, I'm going to dedicate my guest class to introducing the idea how to use whole body power on the example of just two moves: brush the knee stroke and repulse the monkey. Because those are really clear-cut examples of how most people in Tai Chi forms do not use whole body power. Now,
I'm sure I don't know that at my level. That would be really, yeah.
and that's what we study first. We want to learn the principles first, so that when we engage in any activity, be it a form or lifting a child up in the arms, we do this following these principles rather than just doing certain routines.
You're applying those principles then. Yeah.
We apply the principles and we do this mindfully. So if we feel like we are contradicting any of the principles that we have tested and understood to work, well, then we can adjust our actions so that we realign ourselves with action with those principles.
Okay.
And that's something that we do in our practice. We take Tai Chi, practice Tai Chi moves, and we actually refine them in a way that allows us to apply the principles that we understand, that we test. And nothing that I teach has to be taken on faith. It's not a faith-based practice, it's an evidence-based practice. So we put everything through testing, and then if we recognize that testing proves that this principle works very consistently, then we learn how to apply this principle. If something doesn't work consistently, well, we keep on checking to see what would work and basically do that which works best for us, which also gives us the sense of authenticity in our practice, because we're not just following somebody else, you know, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah, and that is how you define your Qigong, right? I mean, if it is, obviously it's authentic to you, it's working for you. That's why everybody has a different kind of definition, or, you know, it just depends on what you resonate with. And
How
so if
long
you are,
did you study Tai Chi, Lama?
There are thousands of
How long did you study Tai Chi form?
There are thousands of masters, and pretty much each master came up with his own form, just like in Tai Chi. Why? Well, it's because what works for one person may not work for another person. If we're just trying to mimic the moves of another person without understanding what those moves mean,
Right.
we are just doing mindless practice. How to make it mindful? Well, we need to understand the meaning of each and every action that we take, each and every step that we take, each and every move that we perform. We want to understand what is behind this move. Why are we doing this? And why are we doing it this way? And is there any more effective way to do it? If there is, well, why don't we do it more effectively? And then we also learn how to integrate them in a culture of movement. So these are not just disjointed moves, but they actually develop the ability to apply them at each and every moment in our lives. So we're not just doing some choreographed routine of moves like in Tai Chi form and hope that it's going to be helpful. I know more Tai Chi practitioners of high caliber than I care to admit that get beat up whenever push comes to shove. If we practice internal martial arts, we need to actually have some kind of martial arts prowess if we are if we're trying to claim any mastery of it. But most Tai Chi teachers and practitioners don't have mastery of martial arts. There are too many examples of how they get beat up by somebody who just punches them in the nose and they have no recourse to that. Well, it's basically an opportunity to develop martial arts abilities, but also the abilities to apply it to daily life so that we can act in our daily lives also following these principles, which, like I said, leads to peak performance. If we perform at peak, it means we achieve more by doing less. Who wouldn't want that?
No.
Any other questions that
Diane is asking a question.
Yes?
Diane, weren't you asking him how long he had done Tai
I
Chi?
just quickly wanted to know, did you study Tai Chi forms and for how long?
Me? I studied Tai Chi since I was about 12. So I'm 50 now. So it's 38 years.
Wow, okay.
And specifically, she was asking, are you wondering about a specific form or just
If I lose
his style of Tai Chi?
I might disappear on you because they're telling me my connection is very unstable. I'm waiting for Comcast to come. I'm not on my own secure line. I'm on Xfinity's line, and the signal is not that great. So in case I vanish, you'll know why. Anyway, that's just an aside. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks, Diane. Sean, were there any other questions revealed by our
From the poll?
questionnaire or Paul?
Well, the second most popular question was, why is Qi called an integral energy art?
For exact reason we were just talking about. It integrates the principles into a system that doesn't have contradictions within it. That's the beautiful thing about our system of understanding of things, the body of knowledge, is that the principles actually are not contradicting each other. There are a lot of paradoxical things within Qi Dao, but the paradox is not the contradiction. Paradox, for example, like if you want to become more flexible, shorten the muscles first. Well, it's paradoxical, but it's not contradicting any principles. What we do also is we integrate different applications into one unified system of knowledge. By applications, I mean, we talked about therapeutic applications, we talked about martial arts applications, we talked about Taoist applications, we talked about Buddhist applications, such as pursuit of enlightenment. We talked about tantric applications, which is creating mutually empowering and enlightening relationships. And we'll talk about Confucianist applications. That's basically the reason why we even do our coaching sessions in the first place. And what we do is we integrate them in such a way that they are integrated or integral. And by integral, I also means we integrate our energy centers in a way that they work together instead of just running amok. By energy centers, I mean the chakras, which are not very well represented in Chinese medicine. They usually talk about just 3 dantians. But if we're talking about chakras, obviously there are more of those. And we learn how to use them in a way that where they're not being taxed all the time. So in other words, we don't overuse one or the other. And we also learn how to switch from one to another smoothly and effectively whenever necessary. So basically it gives us access to more resources without feeling like we're stuck in the paradigm of thinking or a certain rut. And lastly, we also develop integral attitude towards a way of looking at things by integrating different perspectives. You know how different people often get stuck in certain perspectives? You know, somebody is a Republican and they're just going to think that that's the best thing since sliced bread. And somebody may think that they're Democrats and they get stuck in that perspective. Or maybe somebody thinks that they are, I don't know, Orthodox, whatever Orthodox may mean. And they are stuck in that perspective. And everybody else who's not in alignment with that perspective is wrong. Now what we do is we learn how to recognize that each perspective may have certain valid points. And there are pros and cons to everything. So what we do is we learn how to widen our perspective, embracing a number of different ways of looking at things, different vantage points, so that they become all available to us. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that we erode our authenticity. No, we just expand our authenticity instead. And that basically means that we can be authentic, even though we can be talking to somebody who is a Republican and appreciate them for being who they are. And we can talk to somebody who is a Democrat and we can appreciate them for who they are as well. Basically, it creates the ability to wage peace instead of waging war. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Cool. What's the third most popular question?
Third most popular question is, what brand of shirt do you wear?
The brand of shirt I wear is called Academy of Qidao shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see.
In case sometimes Facebook makes funny things, like, for example, reversing or creating mirror image of things, so you can't really read things. So in case that's happening, well, it's Academy of Qidao brand. Basically, it's the school that I pioneered or started 20 years ago. And that's the school dedicated to both my family style of Qidao, but it also is the one and only school that I know of that trains people how to become professional Qigong coaches. So we have Qigong coach certification programs in addition to Qigong coaching services and group coaching programs that we offer to the general public. And that's basically what I do full time. And I work with a number of apprentices who also do it full time or part time, or learning how to do it. And this is something that I invite all our viewers to explore if they want to discover for themselves a line of work that would be in alignment with what they love doing, and actually find a way to turn it into a vocation instead of a pastime.
And you too can have a t-shirt.
You do get a t-shirt, that's right. I have a lot of these t-shirts. So
I'm egging him on to get out of the Martha Stewart range of colors, but you know, we'll get there.
I'm a little partial to black, yeah.
You're partial to what?
Black,
Black.
the color black.
Well, I guess we'll have to print black Qidao t-shirts.
I'm from New York, so everyone from New York wears black. That's the signature color for New York, black.
All right. Well,
Just-
that works for me too. I wear a lot of black clothes, but not black T-shirts.
It became a sort of uniform for me to try to simplify my life because especially females, you would appreciate this, ladies. Men are just easier to dress. Women, it's like always this color coordinating with the nail polish and the pocketbooks. And I went to Catholic school, okay? I was raised. And so I went to Catholic elementary and then high school. And so you always had a uniform. And it kind of like my mind went back to that years later when I was working. I said, I need to simplify my wardrobe because I can't be bothered looking in my closet trying to color coordinate. What works? Red, blue, black, white, just and really limited my work. So black became it. Black goes with everything.
Very well. Okay. Well, if there are no more profound questions, perhaps we can round our gathering up, and we'll meet again next Saturday. I will look forward to that. Please take your time to think about any questions that you would like to bring up in our next gathering, and also feel free to spread the word, inviting other people who might be interested in learning about Qigong and Qidao in particular, and I will look forward to seeing you then.